Welcome back to the Sweepstakes Baseball podcast where we talk about all things college baseball. Starting now, we are just past week 8 of the season. A lot of crazy mix-ups over the past week, but we're going to jump right in, starting with our player of the week. Could go a few different directions. There was a pitcher at Lamar who had a technically some might call it a no-hitter, even though the game went 11 innings. Did end up, the whole game was a combined no-hitter, but the pitcher went the full 9, but obviously was not able to get the win there. So not given the scales to tilt that direction this week, since we did also have a no-hitter as our player of the week last week. We're going to give it to the main man, Nick Kurtz, out of Wake Forest. He's been struggling a bit this year, had his injury early in the year to start things off, and was scuffling a little bit, just couldn't get those power numbers there, and it seems like he's finally back to being healthy. Had 6 home runs on the week, 5 over the weekend, including 3 on Sunday, and if you go back one further game from the past week, he had 2 home runs to finish up the previous series, so that's 8 over the past 5 games. So it really seems like he's getting the groove going and carrying that offense to a place where it needs to be, especially since the pitching staff has definitely had its struggles, even though it was supposed to be the main carrier. And it really seemed like Nick Kurtz carried the team this week to a road sweep over ranked Virginia Tech.
Yeah, Nick Kurtz is really what makes that offense go. I mean, they have a lot of good pieces on that offense, but he's the main piece there. Projected top 10 pick in the upcoming draft, and yeah, just incredible player, and has been dealing with injuries like you said, but seems like he's coming on the right side of things now, and it seems like Wake might also be turning that corner as well as he healthies up.
Yeah, definitely seems like Wake is hopefully starting to get back on track to being a top contender, at least in their conference. But from there, we're going to go to our top play of the week. Might be a little different. There were a few number of good plays out there, nothing that was necessarily spectacular that I saw. So we're going to switch it up a little and just bring out the story that brought out a lot of conversation and debate. So here's the clip now of what happened over the past week.
Reviewing an excessive tag, excessive right knee could be, yeah. I just don't, something's just, Johnny Long had like an outer body experience there.
To me, right there, everything's cool. Like, it's all good, right? And even there, but like now it gets, and I guess they can review this part of it, but this is where it goes, to me, beyond just an emotional play to record an out of the play.
So right here we have the series between Mississippi State and Georgia. This is the Saturday game where Johnny Long, the catcher for Mississippi State, decided to get a little bit physical after the play. He was able to convert the out at home, but decided, that wasn't enough, and I'll, somewhat tackle the guy who's already on the ground, just keep pushing him back and get a little bit more physical, and that brought out the... a lot of suspensions that did eventually get revoked, but it was definitely a topic of conversation over the past week in college baseball with what, happened. The dugouts cleared out, and, pitchers came back from the bullpens. It was a lot of craziness for not really anything that necessarily should have happened.
Yeah, it's definitely extracurricular. I don't believe there was any warnings before this previously in the series. So I'm not really sure that there was any ejections that were warranted here, let alone 11 of them. Maybe you eject the catcher there because, it is extra, but it's still really not all that physical or anything. It's definitely extra, but to eject that many people and also the delay, the review was almost 40 minutes. You can't just have people standing there for 40 minutes waiting for a ridiculous decision like that. The players are trying to re-warm up in the dugout. There's just no way a review should ever take that long, especially for a situation like that.
Yeah, I mean, for that review, it's not like the players know how long it's going to take either. So, they'd probably think that it's going to be like maybe a little bit longer than a normal review, sure. So 5-10 minutes, something like that. For it to go like 40 or some odd minutes is, yeah, absolutely ridiculous. It's like, also, a lot of those players that were initially ejected, they were like pulling people like away. It's not like they were a part of a huge fight. Nothing really even happened. Yeah, words were said. There was a little bit of physicality, but nobody was like throwing elbows, punches. It was a pretty clean affair outside of like the initial contact. So it was interesting to see how everything played out, and a lot of people were rightly upset and furious about how the umpires kind of dealt with the situation, and for the SEC to go back on what had happened during the game kind of speaks volumes to that.
Yeah, I mean, when you see 11 ejections, I think you automatically assume some punches were thrown, or at least both benches would be fully cleared and them face to face all across the board. But like you said, there really just wasn't all that much there. And glad the SEC tried to correct it some, but I mean, they really need to tighten up that process as far as the review goes as well in real time.
Yeah, and it definitely impacted the end of the game because so many players that were playing were unable to, and even players that could potentially come in later in the game were also, ejected. So definitely impacted the future of that specific game at least. But yeah, jumping from there, we have our patent pending sweep setback of the week. Staying in the SEC is the one team that consistently had okay weeks and finally had an absolutely abysmal one, and that is none other than Florida, now sitting with 14 losses overall and only 17 wins. Just a crazy record to be a team that what was in the top 10, almost a top 5 team, to have that many losses was just, the only reason for that was just because they were winning their weekend series and picking up a lot of midweek losses, but still beating good SEC teams. And finally, in their one opportunity to take advantage of a team that has been a basement dweller for the SEC for the past few years at least. And they did eventually. This is one of their first midweek wins over Florida A&M. They had all the opportunity in the world, and then they went to Missouri and got swept. And yeah, just absolutely awful. You really need to take advantage of a situation like that, especially for, this Florida team that already had so many losses and could be on the outside looking in very quickly for rankings. And will be definitely dropping back a lot if anything.
Yeah, I mean, after they finally pick up the midweek win, and if you're a Florida fan there, you're thinking maybe we get a 4-0 week here finally put together a full week. And then just to get swept on the weekend is just brutal. I mean, there's no off weeks in the SEC, but playing Missouri is as close as it gets, and unfortunately just couldn't even pull off a singular win. And like you said, I mean, the record is just absolutely abysmal now as far as it goes for a ranked team, let alone a team that was at the very top of the rankings. So, yeah, they really, really need to get things straight here, and it's not going to get easy throughout SEC play either.
Yeah, Missouri is the team that you set aside kind of in that SEC that is like, all right, this is the team that we could potentially sweep. All the other ones, sure, sweep could happen. If we are able to win the first 2 games, anything's up in the air at that point. But like Missouri is the team at the start of the weekend, you're thinking, all right, we have a chance to sweep this team and take advantage of that. And yeah, even if Florida happened to lose their midweek, that's a week where you're thinking, all right, 3-1 is a possibility, even with a midweek loss that we kind of expect at this point. So to get that win and then, just have an absolutely awful weekend really, really puts a lot of question marks in this Florida team. And they're just overall, I wouldn't say ability, because we know how talented the whole roster is and what they bring to the table consistently. But I don't know, just something's not clicking, and when you're not fully, clicking in the SEC, you're going to be at the very bottom because there are so many good teams at the top. But after that, we're going to jump into our prediction results from the past week. We pick 5 series for the upcoming weekend and do a little prediction and go head-to-head. Right now, as it stands, we are now back to being tied me and Kevin both at 19 and 21 after a terrible week for me going 1-4, Kevin going 3-2. Of course, the series where we both agree on the team to win, which was Vanderbilt at LSU. We both chose LSU, and that happened to be the incorrect choice, as per usual, where we essentially, whenever that happens, we're going to expect that team to lose. Even, previous weeks we've gotten a few agreements to go in our direction, but majority has probably gone the other way. So, yeah, it hasn't been the best, but we're just biding our time, just waiting, because we're ready to pounce and make some big money moves in the future and get these numbers up quickly.
Yeah, I mean, it's honestly pretty crazy that our double picks don't pan out that often, because it's not usually both of us trying to make a bold take or anything or try to pick the underdog. It's usually when we're going with the safe bet, the favorite, the one that's at home and you think it's locked in. But yeah, for whatever reason, if we're both on it, it's not likely to happen.
Yeah, definitely is unfortunate how consistent this happens, and you just got to put some money aside for whenever we're agreeing on the team to win. It's going to be the other direction. But now we'll jump into our new Week 8 rankings. The top 5 all had pretty good weeks, so there's not really going to be any movement there, but we can just quickly run through that. We got Arkansas still at number 1 after going 4-0, sweeping Ole Miss on the weekend. Ole Miss was a team past few weeks ago, seemed like they had an opportunity to become a ranked team, be in that kind of middle fight in the SEC, but that has definitely become less and less of an option the further the season goes on and the more they face that top-tier SEC team. So, yeah, Arkansas sweeping Ole Miss, just looking impressive overall as they consistently look like that number 1 team in the nation and kind of separate themselves even further. But, yeah, Clemson doing a similar thing on the road versus Notre Dame, swept them. So, nothing really to say there. They're taking advantage of the teams that they're having to face. Got a little dicey on that Sunday game versus Notre Dame. They had a big lead and gave it away, but was able to finish things off late. And, yeah, just looked really good. Those top 2 teams, seems like they may have a bit of a separation, but, yeah, the next few are also very, very solid at this point.
Yeah, Ole Miss and Notre Dame aren't great teams this season, but both have shown some flashes of some good things and, not necessarily easy weekends for either Arkansas or Clemson, but both took care of business, got the sweeps, and yeah, I mean, Arkansas just looks so complete in every facet of the game right now, and Clemson just continues to find ways to win close games. Seems like especially in those high-scoring ones, they have a lot of high-scoring games where they're winning by 1 or 2 runs. So, I mean, I think Clemson are just a team full of closers that know how to finish out the game, and yeah, know how to get a win by any means necessary.
Yep, for sure. And then the next 2 teams at 3 and 4, staying in those spots, Texas A&M and Tennessee, both won their weekend series against decent SEC teams on the road. Texas A&M faced what was 18th ranked South Carolina, won that series there, and yeah, really impressive considering a few weeks ago South Carolina swept Vandy, so being able to get that kind of separates Texas A&M from maybe that next pack of teams. Yeah, and then right behind them, Tennessee going 2-1 at Auburn, and good series overall. Did well to win on the road versus an Auburn team that just consistently seems like they're just getting unlucky, and their schedule is just absolutely brutal, so they're just not getting any wins. But yeah, Tennessee looked like they're in their wins, they got them in dominant fashion, so they were able to really turn things up when they needed to.
Yeah, solid weeks from both these teams. Texas A&M picked up a nice midweek win over Texas State as well, and yeah, would just agree that Texas A&M is looking like the second best SEC team right now. Still a bit of a gap between them and Arkansas, but still just very complete. And Tennessee did a really nice job of bouncing back from that first game loss at Auburn. Absolutely dominated the next 2 games. The offense just put up crazy numbers. Hit double-digit home runs, I believe, in those last 2 games. So that offense is unreal. We've said it the whole year that there's just a bunch of talent in that position player group, and I mean, they can put up as as many runs as anybody else can.
Yeah, for sure. It seems like Tennessee, maybe Clemson, have the best offense, or at least some of the best in the nation right now. And anybody can do anything on that team. But now at number 5, we have Oregon State staying in that spot after a 5-0 week, beating Gonzaga twice in midweek, and then sweeping Arizona State on the weekend. Really, really good bounce back week after struggling a little bit against USC last week, getting 2 losses there. But yeah, going 5-0, love to see it, able to capitalize on some maybe lesser opponents. But I mean, it's a conference series, anything can really happen, and getting a sweep there is super impressive. And yeah, won some close games on the weekend, but got the job done.
Yeah, I mean, any week you go 5-0, you'll definitely take that, no matter the competition. And both those teams weren't terrible either. They're decent, but not great. And yeah, Oregon State, good to see them bounce back from a rough weekend last weekend. Got back on track, and yeah, still very high on this team overall.
Yeah, and now at 6, we have Vanderbilt going up 1 spot from last week after winning at what was number 16 LSU. This was the series that we both predicted wrong. We both chose LSU, and that was not the case. This LSU squad is really struggling, and Vanderbilt was able to capitalize on the road. And get a really solid road win that usually you're, struggling to get, especially at LSU.
Yeah, this was a very good week for Vanderbilt on the road. Vanderbilt has just looked like one of the best teams in the country when they're clicking, and I think this was a week of them getting back in the mojo, getting back in the right direction. And so, yeah, I think this team's extremely dangerous, and if they play like this at the end of the year, heading into the postseason, would feel confident picking them against anyone in the country, really.
Yeah, and I've stated before that I'm a certified Vanderbilt hater this year. That was the reason behind me choosing LSU the past week, and I kind of have to eat my words. Yeah, when this Vanderbilt team is clicking, we've seen that they can really take it to any team, but they do have a little bit of inconsistencies here and there. When they're struggling, they can really fall off a cliff offensively. So, yeah, but when they're playing their best ball, they can compete with anybody. At 7, now we have Duke also going up 1 spot from last week after a 4-0 week, sweeping Miami on the weekend, which is a pretty solid sweep. Miami doesn't have a great record now, but they have faced a lot of tough competition and been a competitor in a lot of those games. And this weekend was also a very tight series and could have gone either way, but Duke got the job done in the end.
Yeah, I kind of feel like Miami's the ACC version of Auburn, where they've just played a really tough schedule to start out conference play and don't really have the record to validate them being a good team, but they are solid. Do have some good wins, but just don't really have the overall resume that other good teams do. And so I think this was a solid series from Duke, and I think it's better than it looks on paper too.
Yeah, for sure. And then at 8, we have another ACC team in Virginia going up 2 spots from last week after winning the series versus what was number 9 North Carolina. So really, really good top 10 series win here. I thought that it really could go either way, but the Virginia offense looked super solid this past week, and really this whole year they've been a very, very solid offensive ball club, and showed out versus North Carolina here.
Yeah, very impressive series win, and probably one of the more exciting series of the weekend. Pretty competitive games, and yeah, it was just good atmosphere. 2 very good teams, and both still towards the top of our rankings, and both just teams that are very high on our profile.
Yep, and now at number 9, we have Florida State. I think this is the first time. Is it the first time they made it into our top 10, I believe, after having a insane start to the year to get them ranked. Now they're finally cracking that top 10 at number 9 after going 4-1, getting 2 midweek wins, and then going to Boston College and winning the series there. So good week overall. It was a pretty mediocre competition, but still in conference, going on the road and taking the series is good nonetheless. Boston College has looked not great this year, but still got the job done and took the series, and that's primarily what matters.
Yeah, very good week from Florida State, and potentially edging into that upper tier of the ACC, probably on the fringe there from being in the Tier 2, looking to go into Tier 1 there with, Virginia, Duke, and Clemson.
Yeah, I think Florida State has to maybe prove it a little bit more against the top competition right now, even though they're right behind some of the other teams there. They haven't really played amazing. The Clemson series could have gone either way, really. Florida State should have probably won at least one game there, but yeah, that's really the only gauge that we have at this point to rank them. But yeah, they were competitive, so we've seen that side of things. But now at number 10, what I think is our biggest mover the past week, at least going up in that direction, is Kentucky now. At 10, going 3-0 the past week, sweeping what was number 12 Alabama. Kentucky was 20 last week, so jumping up 10 spots, super impressive. They just absolutely dominated Alabama, and this was kind of their first test of the year. They've had a super, what seems like, easy schedule so far. They got the job done. They only had 4 losses going into the weekend, and to sweep an Alabama team that has been what seemed like a pretty decent SEC squad to start out the year. Really, really impressive results from Kentucky, and why they finally proved that they should be one of the top contenders in the SEC right now.
Yeah, a pretty light schedule for Kentucky to start SEC play, and that's why they weren't very high in the rankings, but now all the way up to 11 SEC wins already. And like you said, it wasn't just the sweep. It was the way they did it. They just absolutely manhandled Alabama. It wasn't not even close. And to see them handle tough competition like that is very encouraging moving forward, because their schedule is very backloaded with the tough competition. But seeing that series makes you think that they may be able to hang in there and maybe scrap a series or two against some of those tougher teams.
Yeah, at this point, they're pretty much set to be a top 16 host for regionals, maybe even top 8 if they can scrap a few wins here or there. But really, they don't have to do much the rest of the year in order to guarantee them a hosting spot in regionals. So yeah, what Kentucky's done so far, they've passed every test and don't really have to pass many more in order to be in a very good spot come postseason. But now at number 11, we have East Carolina moving up 3 spots from last week after a 3-1 week, beating NC State, what was a ranked NC State, on the road midweek, and then going to FAU and winning that weekend series. So really, really good week overall. They passed the test. This is probably one of their tougher weeks during the season, and to go 3-1 is impressive. This is a week that could have easily gone 2-2 if they're not on top of things. And yeah, what you need to do as a mid-major is go and win weeks like this and get the job done, and they were able to do that here.
Yeah, FAU's one of the tougher teams they'll face in conference play, so good to see them tackle that series and also pick up that midweek win over a solid team like NC State. The Carolinas just continue to dominate the college baseball world, and East Carolina, good to pick up a win over a fellow team in that region.
Yeah, and now going out west at number 12, one of the top schools on the West Coast right now, it seems like, is UC Irvine, going up 5 spots from the past week after beating UC Santa Barbara on the weekend. Maybe one of their toughest, if not the toughest week during the entire season that they'll have. Probably the other contender in their conference there, going against Santa Barbara there, and they just looked the part and looked pretty dominant in their wins. They lost one of the games over the weekend, but you can't really expect much more from UC Irvine. Just got the job done for the most part and really impressed in their wins.
Yeah, impressive weekend, and like you said, played really well in their 2 wins, and the 1 loss was very winnable as well. Didn't get blown out or anything. They had a chance in the bottom of the 9th to potentially tie it up there. But yeah, very high on this team, and like you said, one of the better teams on the West Coast right now for sure.
Yep, and at 13 we have North Carolina dropping back 4 from last week after a 1-2 week at what was number 10 Virginia, now number 8. So, I mean, you kind of not really expect a result like that, but you're not too upset after going to a top 10 team and losing the series. Happy you don't get swept there because it definitely could have happened after they lost their first 2 games. So not the best week, but, played a close series versus Virginia, so really could have been worse.
Yeah, definitely not too discouraging of a weekend. And, you would like to win one of the first 2 games, but coming away with the Sunday win kind of boost the vibes going into the next week. So have confidence that they'll be able to regain and, get things going again moving forward.
Yeah, and at 14, we have Dallas Baptist after a 2-2 week, winning their midweek, but then losing to Western Kentucky on the weekend. Tough week on the road. It seems like Western Kentucky is a pretty decent squad overall, but as a mid-major, like I mentioned, similarly with East Carolina, these are the weeks you kind of want to do well at because this is, your toughest competition, some of at least. So Dallas Baptist going 2-2 isn't terrible, but it's also not great here.
Yeah, this is probably one of the better teams they'll face in conference play as well. And so that's definitely a series you'd like to win and add that to the resume. 2-2 week, not bad overall. Still one of the better mid-majors in the country and still have an impressive resume overall. Just a little bit disappointing this week.
Yeah, and then at 15, we have Wake Forest jumping up 7 from last week after a super impressive weekend result, going to what was number 21 Virginia Tech and pulling off the sweep. So these were both teams that were at the back end of our top 25, and Wake Forest just really seemed like they were clicking on all cylinders offensively. Seems like a little bit struggle still on the pitching staff, but with Nick Kurtz, what's seeming like fully healthy now, the offense hopefully can pick up where the pitching has some deficiencies.
Yeah, looks like this team is starting to get back on track after sweeping on the road. And like you said, the pitching staff is struggling, but you have Chase Burns, you have Josh Hartle. You know that it could just take 1 week for the staff to get clicking all together. I mean, if you get both of those guys going long into games, that really frees up a lot of arms to cover the rest of the relief of those games and just one more game on Sundays. So if they're able to help the bullpen not have to stretch as far, and I think that would really help them moving forward as well.
For sure. At 16 now is our first team jumping into the rankings from last week, which is UCF after a 3-1 week, winning versus Kansas State on the weekend, where they just continue to win conference series week after week. I think 4 straight weeks they've won conference series against decent teams. And yeah, they're just piling it up. Seems like maybe one of the better teams in conference, at least consistently at this point. And now 21-8 overall. Don't really see teams like this jump into the rankings at least this high. But yeah, there was just a lot of movement in the back end to be able to capitalize, and UCF jumping straight into the middle of the top 25 now.
Yeah, this was a team that was on our radar for a while there, but getting swept by Oklahoma to start conference play, kind of tough to justify them as hanging around there or moving in the rankings yet. Took a couple weeks of conference play to really solidify things and, show that they've rebounded. But, yeah, they're playing really well right now and look like they may be the best team in the Big 12 currently.
Yeah, definitely seems like one of the best teams in that conference for sure. And then at 17, we have Oregon jumping up 7 spots from last week after a 3-1 week, going to Portland midweek, getting that win there, and then going to UCLA and winning the series. So good weekend, or good week overall in general to go on the road to 4 games and go 3-1. Portland looks like a pretty decent team this year as well, so winning that midweek is pretty impressive, at least somewhat. So yeah, definitely had the opportunity to go up here and took advantage of it fully to be able to jump into that 17 spot.
Yeah, you'll take a 3-1 week when all 4 games are on the road, and yeah, Oregon's won every conference series so far. The only blemish on the resume is that series loss to Santa Barbara. So not that bad of a series loss there, and the overall resume is looking pretty solid right now.
Yep. And now at 18, we have one of our biggest fallers this week with Florida in that spot. Now 17-14. We talked about it earlier. They went 1-3 and got swept by Missouri on the weekend. So just struggling overall. Really seems like they just had a complete off week. A lot of just inconsistencies overall. This Missouri team should be outclassed by Florida in pretty much every aspect of the game here, and Florida was just not able to capitalize on a series that they should have won and maybe should have probably swept. Still on the road, so difficult, but Florida really needed to capitalize, especially with how their record was at that point. So now looking like they're at the back end of the top 25 now, even though they started SEC conference play super well, now sitting at, I believe, 6-6 now. So really just gave that all away after getting swept.
Yeah, this is just absolutely demoralizing weekend. To finally get the midweek win. Can't put it together on the weekend. It's just really hard to know what to think of this Florida team. And I think that's reflected by the overall record, which just isn't that exciting, not impressive at all. We know the talent's there, and if they're clicking, they could be one of the better teams in the country, but they just haven't clicked at that level at any point this year.
Yep, and now at 19 is Coastal Carolina, staying in that spot from the past week after going 2-2, losing their midweek and then beating Old Dominion on the weekend. So okay week overall, but losing the midweek is pretty disappointing, but still got a decent result on the weekend, but really should have probably gone 3-1 to consider it a good week. 2-2 just isn't really cutting it. Luckily, a lot of teams around them did bad, so they're able to stay in that spot right now.
Yeah, 2-2 weeks, just not what you want as a mid-major. Luckily, they do win the series, which is more important in this case. But yeah, UNC Wilmington's not really a team you want to drop a midweek to, especially if you're a team of Coastal's caliber, a team that we thought would be the best or one of the best mid-majors in the country this year. They just really haven't played to the level that we thought they were at. Still looking good, but just not quite there, really.
Yeah, and now at 20, another team that jumps into our rankings this week after being on the fringe for so long. It's Mississippi State. Even though they went 2-2, I think I said last week if they go 2-2, lose the midweek and win the weekend series, they'll easily be in just because they've just been vying for a spot for so long. Losing series on the weekends to SEC teams, but some of the best teams in the country that they lost to. So finally taking advantage of that, beating a Georgia team that was also fringe ranked the past few weeks, where they were just waiting for an opportunity to win a solid series. But yeah, Mississippi State gets the job done there, even though 2-2 isn't great, able to jump in here.
Yeah, 2-2 week, but 6-6 in SEC play now, and 3 of their series are against 3 of the best teams in the country. They do have a series win over LSU, which isn't looking as impressive at this point, but it's still a solid series win. And yeah, I think this team is better than was reflected in previous rankings.
Yeah, and I think if they started the season out being ranked, they'd be, top 15, if not higher. But because they started outside looking in for a while and not really facing any tough competition to start out the year, it took a while for them to get close to being ranked, even though they had a really good record. But now that they're facing tougher competition and doing pretty well, they're able to jump into the top 25 here. Now at 21, we have Alabama dropping back 9 spots this week after going 1-3, winning their midweek, but then losing to Kentucky, getting swept in a dominant fashion on the road. So really, that was an opportunity for them to show that they are at least, middle top of the SEC, and was not able to do that against a Kentucky team that had the record to be a top team in the SEC, but just hadn't proven it yet. And yeah, it seems like Kentucky is starting to prove it, and Alabama is slowly dropping off.
Yeah, this Bama team is interesting. They have 2 solid series wins in SEC play, but the other 2 weekends, they're getting swept. So not really 100% sure what to think. I do think this is a good team, but just not consistent at this point. We know it's hard to win back-to-back weeks consistently in the SEC, and this team's just not doing that right now, and would like to see more for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And now at 22, another team jumping into our rankings is Louisiana, now officially the best team in the state. Apparently, with LSU falling off, Louisiana now has that top ranking over them, even though the head-to-head went to LSU, but it just does not seem like that same team right now. Louisiana went 4-0 the past week, played mediocre competition, but continues to just win every game that they play right now. So they're extremely hot and definitely deserving of jumping into the rankings this week after a lot of teams at the back end of the top 25 did not have good weeks at all.
Yeah, I mean, reeling off 15 straight wins is impressive no matter who you're playing, and they do have some quality losses. I would like to see them have picked up some of those wins they've played against good teams, but they were close, they were competitive, and we feel like they could pick up some of those games in the future moving forward.
Yep, and now at 23, another team hopping into the top 25 is Oklahoma State. So a little bit more representation for the Big 12 here after a 3-1 week, winning their midweek, and then winning the rivalry series versus Oklahoma on the weekend. And yeah, consistently similar to what UCF has been doing the past few weeks, just winning their weekend series. And in a Big 12 that is really up and down this year, it seemed like TCU for a while was the top dog and nobody was going to get even close to them. They've absolutely fallen off, and yeah, some opportunity to take advantage of here, and there's just a lot of room for potential in the Big 12 of which team could win the conference.
Yeah, in a super messy conference, it seems like OK State is pulling to the top here. Yeah, solid series win over Oklahoma in a rivalry series. That was a big one. Both those teams are teams that have shown flashes at this point in the season, but haven't really been consistent. It seems like Oklahoma State is more so turning that corner to being a team that could contend and, potentially host if they continue to play well through conference play. I know the committee would like there to be one or two Big 12 hosts if they're deserving, and so I think this team's trying to fit that role right now.
Yeah, for sure. And now at 24, we have NC State dropping back from 15 the past week after an 0-4 week, losing to ranked East Carolina in the midweek, and then going to Louisville and getting swept. So really, really bad week overall. It seems like this Louisville squad is starting to turn things around and has produced recently, which is good for them, but NC State's got to do something here. They've just been super inconsistent, similar to what we've seen with Alabama, just winning series and then getting swept, it seems like. NC State really needs to turn things around quickly in order to stay in this rankings.
Yeah, you're right that NC State is similar to Bama with these getting swept, but the trouble with NC State is when they get swept, they also lose the midweek, and just an 0-4 week is just not fun to look at whatsoever. Super demoralizing, and yeah, I mean the same as Bama as well. Though I mean they're certainly have the potential to win some quality series, to beat good teams, but just inconsistent right now, and need to figure out how to make those good wins carry over week to week.
Yeah, and this NC State team was one that we were deciding whether or not to keep in or out. I think if there was another team itching to get in, since we already brought in, I think, 4 teams this week, if there was a fifth that maybe was just on the outside looking in, then we hop them in, but there wasn't anybody that was super convincing at this point, so NC State gets to keep that spot. But now, finishing off our top 25, we have Nebraska staying in the 25 spot after going 2-2, losing at Creighton in the midweek, but then winning versus Ohio State on the weekend. So not a great week. I think if they're similar to what we were saying with NC State, if there was a team that proved themselves for the past week that was right outside the top 25 and deserved to jump in, this Nebraska team would have been one of the first to consider dropping out since they went 2-2. And yeah, they won their weekend series, and I think that's the main reason that we felt somewhat comfortable leaving them in at least one more week.
Yeah, not the best week, but we do like to give the nod to teams that are consistently winning their weekend series, and that's what Nebraska has done for a while now. So props to them for winning the weekend. Would definitely like to see more. I don't think there's too many weeks where you can go 2-2 and you're going to stay in the rankings when you're at the back end like this.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely need to see them improve a little bit to stay in. But now looking at teams that are just on the outside looking in, obviously we have the teams that dropped out this past week. LSU went 1-3, losing the series versus Vanderbilt. Not a great week considering that they just can't win any conference series. We have South Carolina, similar another SEC team that just hasn't been consistent enough to stay in the top 25 after losing versus Texas A&M. So both those teams at home lost the series. Yeah, it was against tough competition, but you're going to need to do something there in order to turn things around. And then we have Virginia Tech also dropping out the past week after getting swept by Wake Forest. This was essentially their first test this year, and they absolutely failed in flying colors, you might say. They really hadn't faced anybody. They had a great record, and that's why they deserve to jump into the rankings, but really hadn't faced any competition yet so far. And then the last team to drop out this week was TCU. Went 0-4, lost their midweek, and then got swept at Cincinnati. So have no idea what's going on with this TCU squad. Seems like they've just completely given up. Cincinnati is a team that they definitely should be beating. Even though Cincinnati's playing relatively well, like TCU was, top 5 team coming into the season. You got to be able to turn things around at some point, and it just doesn't seem like this is happening anytime soon.
Yeah, I think TCU and LSU are just two teams with so many question marks right now as far as just what happened. I mean, both top 5 in most polls going into the season, and now both out of the rankings, and both just have no idea what's happening. I mean, you're just hitting the panic button if you're a fan for either of these teams. You're wondering if the regionals are even a consideration at this point. You need to start winning weekends. You can't have this poor of a record in conference play and make the playoffs. So something needs to go right, and it just isn't right now.
Yeah, I think especially for TCU, making regionals is looking really iffy right now. At least LSU has the RPI of the SEC to bank on, so they can turn things around pretty quickly and at least make it as a 2 seed somewhere, which will be very annoying for whoever gets that 2 seed with the talent that LSU has. But yeah, TCU has really got to start hitting that panic button because they have to turn things around, and maybe the only way for them to make it to the postseason is to win their conference tournament. But now looking at the teams just on the outside, looking in, we have Campbell, who dropped out last week, had a decent week overall, so they're right on the outside looking in. Wanted to keep them out one more week just to confirm that they deserve to be a mid-major jumping in. But a lot of other mid-majors that have just been on the fringe for a while now. We have Lamar the past few weeks has really shown up as a team that has a very good record and has proven it against decent squads. Creighton, similar. They haven't faced amazing competition, but over the past week they did beat Nebraska in the midweek, so that kind of is a bright spot there, winning against a team that could be ranked and is ranked this week. So yeah, impressive. We have Indiana State. They lost the past weekend, but they've just been on the outside looking in for it seems like the whole season, or right there. And then Southern Miss, another team that has beaten some good competition, has faced a pretty tough schedule overall, but has done relatively well recently, but not the past week, so isn't able to jump in here.
Yeah, I think it's mostly those mid-majors, like you said. A lot of those teams that just haven't consistently done it quite the last couple weeks, but have been on the fringe and close to jumping in there, but not quite yet. This week would have been a really good opportunity for some of those teams, but need to keep putting it together consistently. And like you said, also a couple of those teams that dropped out, LSU, South Carolina, just all it takes is one really good week and they're right back in consideration, especially with the quality of competition they'll be playing.
Yeah, that's kind of just what happens with those Power 4, Power 5 conferences. You really just need one good week to turn things around. I mean, this year it seems like it's really just a Power 2 conference with the SEC and ACC, but in other years it might be a little easier for some other teams to jump in. But yeah, especially for those two conferences, all you need is a few week spell of doing really well and you're right back in consideration. So don't really need to mention them that often because they'll fly up the boards a lot quicker than these mid-major teams. But I think that's it for our podcast this week. Thanks for making it all the way through this and watching to completion. So keep an eye out for later in this week. We have our weekend series predictions where we will, predict 5 series. There aren't amazing ones this week. There are only a few ranked versus ranked matchups coming up. Seems like a real down week for the ACC overall. But stay tuned for that, and we'll see you next time.